You know, this might look like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it's a completely true story. It's about a scientific breakthrough that literally changed medicine forever. We're talking about a doctor who got so frustrated with the medical establishment that he took matters into his own hands in the most extreme way you can possibly imagine.
What if I told you that for decades, millions of people were suffering from a really common illness, and the entire medical world thought they knew the cause, but they were completely 100% wrong? Well, that's not some hypothetical question. It's the actual backstory to one of the most common ailments in modern history.
So what are we talking about here? Stomach ulcers. For generations, if you had an ulcer, it was this chronic, agonizing condition. And you were basically told, well, you just have to manage it, maybe for your entire life. But the real story, the real cause, was hiding in plain sight the whole time.
Okay, so to really get how big of a deal this discovery was, we first have to talk about the myth. For the longest time, the reason for ulcers seemed so obvious, so logical, that it became this unshakable fact in medical textbooks and, in everyone's mind. And you can see why everybody believed it, right? It makes sense. Oh, you have a high-pressure job, you're going to get an ulcer. You love spicy food? Well, you're just asking for trouble. Doctors would tell their patients to calm down, eat bland food, and pop antacids. And that was it. That was the undisputed truth.
But here's the thing. While the entire world was busy blaming stress and spice, this tiny, critical clue was starting to surface, and it pointed in a completely different, and at the time, totally unbelievable direction. And this is where our heroes enter the story. We've got Dr. Robin Warren, a pathologist in Perth, Australia, and his young, ambitious partner, Dr. Barry Marshall. Now, these guys weren't setting out to start a revolution. They were just doing their jobs and paying really, really close attention to what they were seeing under the microscope. And this is what they kept finding. This tiny, little, spiral-shaped bacterium, which they eventually named Helicobacter pylori. And it wasn't a fluke. It was there, consistently, in biopsy after biopsy, from patients who had ulcers and stomach inflammation. There it was. This was the one clue that just didn't fit the official story. So they put forward a pretty simple idea. What if this bacterium is the real cause? Now, to us today, that sounds totally logical. But back then, oh man, this idea was met with total ridicule and rejection. It was considered completely impossible. And this was the giant brick wall they kept hitting. See, the human stomach is basically a pit of hydrochloric acid. It's one of the most hostile environments you can imagine. The accepted wisdom was that nothing, no bacteria, could possibly survive in there. So, to the rest of the medical community, Marshall and Warren's idea wasn't just wrong, it was laughable.
And this just lays out the conflict perfectly. On one side, you have the dogma, the rules of biology that everyone just knew were true. And on the other side, you have the cold, hard data, physical evidence of this tiny bacterium just chilling out, thriving, right at the scene of the crime. The data was literally screaming that the textbooks were wrong.
So you can imagine the frustration. Their research papers were getting rejected. They were being ridiculed at medical conferences. Nobody was listening. And since they couldn't get approval for a proper human trial, Barry Marshall decided he needed to provide proof so dramatic, so undeniable, that no one could ever ignore. He decided to use the one test subject he had complete control over, himself. This wasn't just a bold move, it was unbelievably risky. He was about to intentionally infect himself with a mysterious pathogen, all to settle a scientific debate once and for all. And the experiment itself was just brilliantly simple. First, he mixed up this broth full of H. pylori bacteria and just drank it. And sure enough, within a few days, he got violently ill with gastritis. That's the inflammation that comes right before an ulcer. Then, for the final step, he took a simple course of antibiotics and cured himself completely. He had just demonstrated the entire cycle: infection, disease, and cure. I mean, talk about a mic drop moment in the history of medicine. He didn't just present a theory anymore. He had lived it. The evidence was no longer just some slide under a microscope. It was his own personal, painful medical journey. The bacteria, not stress, was the real villain. After that, the world really had no choice but to listen. The tide finally started to turn. And what followed was one of the fastest, most profound shifts in modern medicine. And it all ended with the highest honor a scientist can receive. Just look at this comparison. This shows you how life-changing this discovery was. Before, treatment was all about managing symptoms. In the worst cases, it meant major surgery to literally cut out part of your stomach.
After their discovery, a cure. A simple, cheap, 2-week course of antibiotics that could get rid of the problem for good.
Now, you'd think the world would change overnight, but it still took time for the establishment to fully come around. But finally, more than 2 decades after their initial discovery, in this year, the ultimate validation arrived.
Yep, the 2 rebels from Australia, the guys who were once laughed out of conferences, were now on stage in Stockholm accepting the Nobel Prize. Their absolute persistence had finally paid off, and their work was vindicated on a global scale.
And really, this is the bottom line. This wasn't just about being right in a scientific debate. Their discovery had a massive, real-world impact. It saved millions of people from a lifetime of pain and prevented countless dangerous, invasive surgeries.
So it kind of leaves you with a really interesting question, doesn't it? Barry Marshall's incredible story is a reminder that sometimes progress requires someone to be brave enough to challenge what everyone thinks is impossible, and maybe even do something a little bit crazy. It makes you wonder, what accepted truth today is just waiting for its own beaker of